But now you can hear me.
So
Yes.
in that way, it's more easy for you to notice if you are really too close
Yeah.
to the microphone.
Okay.
And you have to like,
Or not too. So about there. About there. Well, actually, that's quite natural.
yeah. And I'm going to leave another microphone there.
Yeah. How do you get feedback with headphones?
Sometimes it depends. It's just because when
Okay.
they construct, they left like metal wires. So in a few places you receive like
Okay.
other things.
Just stand still. Sorry? You're signaling. No one can hear me. Oh, so you can hear yourself? Yeah, it's a bit weird. Let me take the one. It's so that you know the microphone works. I can't hear what you're saying. I quite like it. If you shut your eyes and just do the talk like that, like you're in a sensory deprivation.
But we all hear you if you're talking with the microphone.
Yeah,
on here.
I want you to hear me. This is good chat.
Okay. I think we can start.
Yes, let's start. Welcome everybody to a really fascinating and interesting event with a lovely lineup of speakers. And it follows the theme from Monday of From the Amazon to the Cryosphere. And thank you to the organisers for making it happen today and the flexibility of the speakers. And it focuses also on the synergies and interconnection streams that we've seen here and across the Rio conventions in this globally interdependent planet. And it also follows, in fact, from the Rio to Belém room, where the Honourable Minister for the Environment, Climate and Wildlife of the Republic of Zimbabwe announced the Amazon decision for Africa to pursue a declaration on wildlife for climate at COP31. And that was presented at our side event yesterday and supported by the Ambassador of the Gambia. Now, the cryosphere is connected to all other ecosystems, from the Amazon rainforest to the wetlands and marine hydrosphere. And changes in one system or one part of that planetary system influence the stability of others through climate, through biodiversity, through hydrological feedback loops. So this session links for the cryosphere to the whole world. We'll start in the cryosphere and then we'll move around the world. And for that journey, I am delighted to be joined by Maddie Millington-Drake, who's the Senior Climate Project Manager with the Blue Marine Foundation, with Cristina Mendes de Oliveira, who's with the Federal University of Pará here in Belém. Thank you. And to Kelly Dent, who's the Global Director for External Engagement with the World Animal Protection. Thank you, Kelly. And I should say I'm James of the World Federation for Animals. It's lovely to be here. Now, to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees C, we need to go beyond the net zero targets. We need to identify negative emission strategies to get residual carbon out of the atmosphere. And we need to remove at least 6 to 7 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. That's just to stick to 2 degrees. And what we need as part of that is a cryosphere that reflects enough energy as part of the albedo effect. And we need healthy, functioning ecosystems with wide protection from anthropogenic harms. And that's across climate, biodiversity, land degradation and wetland harms. But we've seen that global climate policy has tended to treat these issues and these biomes somewhat in isolation. Now today we'll talk about one thing that unites those issues and unites those ecosystems. One issue that is important across climate and biodiversity and land degradation. Because the research is finding that animals have a disproportionate positive impact on ecosystems. Since we're here in the Cryosphere Pavilion, let's start with some specific cryosphere examples of animals' essential role in ecosystem functioning. So Antarctic krill dominate biomass in the Southern Ocean and act as key ecosystem engineers. Through their massive swarms, their vertical migrations, their large fecal pellets, they transport organic carbon to the deep sea, they recycle iron and other nutrients, they stimulate phytoplankton, and they support this global carbon sink that we need. Or penguins are the cloud makers of Antarctica. Their guano fertilizes the nearshore waters and the soils, allowing phytoplankton and allowing the plants to grow to fix carbon from the atmosphere. And also from their guano, gases help to seed clouds that then reflect greater light, meaning that's not hitting the ice and melting it. And large herbivores such as reindeer in the Arctic tundra significantly influence vegetation composition and ecosystem function, particularly, in fact, under warming conditions that we are already seeing. Because they shape thermophilic plant species, they alter the carbon dynamics, and thereby they improve the resilience of tundra ecosystems. With less vegetation means there's more snow for that increased albedo reflection of energy. And because of that role, their role is going to become increasingly important as climate change accelerates. And finally, blue whales in the Southern Ocean recycle iron, nitrogen, and other nutrients through their feeding and defecation cycles, again boosting that phytoplankton growth, which underpins the productivity of the Southern Oceans, then linked to krill productivity, and strengthens that biological carbon pump. Their recovery from commercial whaling will help restore those lost ecosystem functions, supporting that climate regulation, the nutrient recycling, and the food web resilience in the Antarctic. Now, to provide these functions, animals need to be able to fulfill them. They need to be at flourishing population levels. They need to have their habitats and resources. They need to be healthy. They need to have their interactions and ability and capacity and resilience to perform those actions and to adapt to the ongoing anthropogenic harms. But we are harming these very climate allies through the massive blockers to the ecosystem functioning potential, such as land use and degradation, such as commercial fishing, industrial agriculture that we'll hear about, and of course climate change. We're seeing breeding, resting, feeding habitats vanishing. We're seeing rising shipping and fossil fuel activity. We're seeing overfishing and increasing bycatch. And we're seeing many new threats to the oceans and the animals in it, from noise and ship strike to pollution of many kinds, oil and gas exploration and other offshore industries. And that's pushing many species closer to or to extinction. We've just seen 3 Arctic seal species being reclassified to higher threat levels on the IUCN Red List. The harvesting of krill is threatening penguins and whales. Baleen whale populations, those historic victims of commercial whaling, need to recover. But the current krill biomass cannot support the unnecessary levels of human consumption and whales at their pre-exploitation natural levels. So with that importance of krill, let us consider more those animals that the bedrock of the cryosphere ecosystem. May I introduce Maddie, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. Thank you so much for having me today. For those of you who don't know, Blue Marine is a UK-based marine conservation charity working to achieve the 30 by 30 target. Today I'm going to be talking about the Southern Ocean and krill, one of its most important species. So the Southern Ocean is one of the world's vital climate regulators, an asset in the fight against climate change, and drives our global ocean currents. Processes occurring in the Southern Ocean exert strong controls on regional and global climate through two main avenues. Firstly, the Southern Ocean is disproportionately important in ocean CO2 uptake through the physical and biological carbon pump, sequestering the carbon into the deep sea. This removes CO2 from the atmosphere and reduces climate impacts over the coming decades to centuries. Secondly, changes in sea ice and ocean circulation in the region are important regulators of global and regional climate through impacting the global heat budget. The Southern Ocean's extraordinary biodiversity also has an important role to play. Antarctic krill play a pivotal role in a healthy and biodiverse Southern Ocean ecosystem. Krill, for those of you who may not know, are a small swimming crustacean that feed on photosynthetic phytoplankton and small zooplankton and provide the primary food source for larger organisms, contributing between 70 and 96% of the calories consumed by seabirds and mammals. Total Antarctic krill biomass has been estimated to be 379 million tonnes, making them the largest biomass of any multicellular wild animal species on Earth. They are critical. Krill also help to sequester carbon into the deep ocean, transfer essential nutrients and stimulate primary productivity, and they're thought to sequester 20 million tonnes of carbon per productive season through their faecial pellets alone. Almost all Antarctic wildlife depends on krill, including whales, penguins, seabirds and seals. Migrations of species, including marine mammals and seabirds, between the Southern Ocean and more northerly latitudes play an important role in ecosystems as far away as the North Atlantic along their migratory routes, which can be seen on the screen. However, the Southern Ocean and its ecosystems are under increasing threat from both climate change and the direct impacts of intensifying human activity within and beyond the region. There's already compelling evidence that climate change has already caused large disruptions to the marine ecosystem in the region, and impacts on krill are driven by loss of sea ice cover, as this is the krill's nursery ground. However, the main threat at the moment alongside this is a human-based pressure. Krill populations are under threat from industrial fishing, led by a few wealthy nations. Norway, followed by China and North Korea, are taking the majority of the krill catch. The decline of this iconic penguin species, such as the chinstrap population, have been linked to the krill fisheries as well. This is driven by the demand for omega-3 supplements to feed farm fish and to be used in pet foods. Antarctic krill fishing reached record levels in 2025, and the precautionary catch limit of 620,000 tonnes was reached, which caused an unprecedented early closure of the krill fishery in early August. The significant role of the Southern Ocean region in moderating atmospheric CO2 via the biological carbon pump is underpinned by a healthy and stable marine ecosystem. Large-scale removals of the species such as krill risk reducing the important climate service and leading to more CO2 in the atmosphere. Destabilization of the trophic network through the depletion of krill also affects whales, many of which migrate to breed from the Antarctic to countries such as Tonga, and some which appear to be recovering, such as humpback and fin whales. There are places where whales have huge cultural and economic significance, Pacific Islands, Latin America, African nations, yet these countries don't have a seat at the table of Species in the Southern Ocean species in the Southern Ocean fall. Have you got loads of feedback? Oh, okay. I'm going to check, yeah. Species in the Southern Ocean fall under the protection of the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, also known as CAMLR. Here, 26 countries and the EU lead the decisions on the protection of the Southern Ocean and its wildlife. Since CAMLR's inception, the Convention has established 2 marine protected areas, one near the South Orkney Islands in 2009 and another in the Ross Sea in 2016. These protected areas were an important step forward for safeguarding Antarctic wildlife and demonstrated the power of multilateralism to accomplish conservation goals. Since then, CAMLR nations have been in a state of inertia, unable to find consensus to establish new marine protected areas and struggling to find meaningful conservation progress in Antarctica. This year, the annual meeting of CAMLR took place in October, and once again meaningful progress to implement krill fishing restrictions and the establishment of MPAs failed to be agreed. This is because decisions require consensus of the 27 CAMLR members. Similar to previous years, MPAs were vetoed by some countries. This is, of course, hugely disappointing, not only that the MPAs haven't come to fruition, but that clear determination of countries to increase krill, despite krill fishing reaching record levels, and the lack of political will to renew protective measures. One key issue is that CAMLR doesn't adequately consider climate change impacts. Antarctica is warming 3 times faster than anywhere else on the planet, and Antarctic krill feed on the algae that live under the Antarctic sea ice. Thus, with reduced ice comes increased vulnerability to krill survival. The region's wildlife is already incredibly vulnerable to the threat of climate change, and we do not know what the consequences of increased pressure from wildlife extraction will bring. We do know that whales, penguins and other species that depend on krill are facing increased competition on top of the challenges that they are already facing from climate change. The Our Antarctica campaign calls to close the Southern Ocean to krill fishing and to protect Antarctic wildlife and safeguard ecosystems and climate stability. Proactive action would replenish krill populations by relieving the fisheries stress that is exacerbated by climate change. Establishing an ecologically representative network of MPAs would align CAMLR with international ambition and contribute to global climate and biodiversity targets. Nations should be protecting the integrity of the Southern Ocean ecosystem, not prioritizing the commercial interests of a few. The integrity of its ecosystem should be an international priority. If you'd like to learn more, the QR code there links to the Our Antarctica website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Sobering but important messages of what we need to face into and what we need to do. Now I want us to imagine that we are a humpback whale or a southern right whale, as both head to the Antarctic to feed in the polar summertime, but then they return to warm waters off of coastal Brazil to give birth, to nurse their youngs, to breed for the following year. And the migration corridor between the two was recently, finally, designated as an important marine mammal area by the IUCN Marine Mammal Protected Areas Task Force. So let us go with the whales on their journey as we move to the Amazon. Dr. Chris, please.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I will try to discuss at least 4 reasons why we believe that conserving wild animals is essential to addressing the climate crisis. Okay? So let's go to the Amazon. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, down. Okay. Animals are essential to ecosystem process. So functions, roles such as pollination, seed dispersal, herbivory, and nutrient cycling contribute to the maintenance and restoration of natural environments and also enhance carbon sequestration and storage. So let's talk about pollination first. So about 80% of flowering plants in the tropics depend on cross-pollination, and wild animals carry out more than 90% of this pollination, but also pollination by animals ensures food security, because, for example, 55% of the crops produced in the Amazon depend on animal pollination, special bees that have been massive killed by agrotoxic, for example. The next one is seed dispersal. You can imagine all the seeds trying to germinate under the mother plant at the same time. So the seed dispersal by animals reduce competition among seedlings for nutrients, and 75% of tropical trees have fruit adapted for dispersal by animals. A good example of seed disperser is the agouti, and this coevolution between the Brazil nut tree and agouti is very interesting, because the evolution of the Brazil nut tree, I think everybody knows the Brazil nut tree, is closely linked to the dispersal of its seed by agoutis. The agoutis have this funny way to disperse. They can sit and just hold the seed and just eat the pulp and maintain the seed intact, but they also can bury the seed to eat later, but frequently they forget where they buried it. So it's good for the plant. Also, the tapirs are considered the gardens of the forest. So we did this recent research in our lab, and in just one tapir dropping, we could find over 10,000 seeds of more than 30 species. About 80% of that was intact with germination potential. So with their long-range movements through degraded areas, because tapirs can go to open areas as well, so they help to restore the forest. The herbivory is another reason. The herbivory prevents the dominance of fast-growing, low-carbon plants, increasing the diversity of plants with higher carbon density. So this is a video that we got in an experiment we have here close to Belém, like 5 hours from here, that we have these third pair of parcels, one close, excluding the herbivores, and the other one beside open, that you can just catch this kind of behavior, the herbivory. So also the nutrient cycling. So through movements, trampling, foraging, defecation, and predation, for example, animals modify the microhabits, transport and redistribute nutrients, contributing to the ecosystem stability. So the defaunation, the loss of biodiversity, leads to the loss of all this process, which reduce carbon sequestration and storage in natural environments. In a recent modeling research we have been doing in our lab, we found this relationship between carbon and species richness. So we found this positive relationship between the amount of forest carbon above the ground and diversity of large herbivorous mammals in the Amazon. So we can see these two. These two maps, one of carbon and the other one of the modeling of the richness of the species, and we could find this positive relationship. It's not a simple relationship. It's complex. It's not a linear relationship, but it's positive. So I think that's it I have to show you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, regain your headphones. And we've heard then how important animals in both marine and forest ecosystems are to the climate, biodiversity, and land purposes. But what, of course, we do with lots of other animals is wrench them out of nature, put them into artificial situations where we turn them from climate allies to massive sources of greenhouse gas emissions, of pollution, of use of land and water and human edible feed and energy. And to tell us more about the impacts of industrial agriculture on climate and biodiversity and land use and what we need to do about it, may I introduce Kelly, please?
I don't have any slides. Yeah. Hi, can people hear me okay? Not too loud, not too soft? Perfect. Okay, I don't have any slides. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I guess you just have to listen to me speaking. So thank you, James, and good afternoon, everybody. So the theme that brings us together today, from the frozen poles to the tropical Amazon, this actually reminds us of that our planet's resilience depends on the health and the balance of every ecosystem. And within these ecosystems, wild and farmed animals play a central but often overlooked role. They play a role in regulating biodiversity, maintaining soil and vegetation health, and ensuring food and climate security for people. So today I want to focus on Latin America and how transforming our food system is critical to allowing animals to play the essential role that we want them to play. By reducing deforestation, we can empower animals to contribute to positive outcomes for climate and nature, and we can help create a just, humane future for both animals and people. So in terms of the Amazon, I don't have to tell anybody here, including the people who work in it every day, that the Amazon is under threat. It's home to 1 in 10 of all known species. It's reaching a dangerous tipping point. It's the beating heart of South America's climate system. It produces rainfall that sustains agriculture across the continent, yet it's being cleared at alarming rates. Agriculture is responsible for around 80% of the deforestation that we see in the Amazon, with cattle ranching and soy grown for animal feed being the primary drivers. Our investigations at World Animal Protection, together with allied research, show how industrial animal agriculture and its supply chains are accelerating this destruction. Cattle that's raised for beef, the soy that's grown to feed pigs and chicken in factory farms, they're linked to vast areas of cleared land. We see major corporations, including global meat giants, continue to source from regions where illegal deforestation and where habitat conversion persist. I talk about illegal deforestation here, but there's such a crossover between legal and illegal, and often it's really hard to know the difference. So I think that's really important here as well. So I want to talk a bit about the role of public money. And we've recently relaunched a report called Subsidising Factory Farm Harm. And this report has revealed that governments worldwide spend $842 billion a year, and that is growing. It's estimated to grow up into over $1 trillion in the not too distant future. And this is to support industrial livestock systems. These are subsidies that were actually meant to strengthen food security and strengthen rural livelihoods, when in actual fact what they are doing is propping up high emissions, resource intensive models that erode forests, harm animals and disadvantage small scale producers. In Latin America, we do see that public and private finance still very much flows to large agribusiness, while community-based and Indigenous-led food systems receive only a fraction of that support. We found that in Brazil, subsidies to the beef sector alone are about $3.1 billion, when the industry itself pays about 3.8 US billion annually in taxes. So this is most of what they're getting back in they're getting most of what they pay in taxes back in subsidies. This is a policy choice. This is not an inevitability. And if we were to redirect even part of this finance, we would be able to transform our capacity to protect forests, to restore ecosystems, and to support humane and sustainable production models. So if I turn to the triple impact on climate, nature and animals. So when we speak of deforestation, we often focus on carbon, and that's right. Now, however, the consequences go further. Livestock and feed production contribute roughly a third of methane emissions. That's a potential greenhouse gas that accelerates ice melt in the polar regions that are represented here today. And on nature, the expansion of pasture and feed crops destroys biodiversity hotspots, it fragments habitats, and it undermines ecosystem resilience across the Amazon and across the Cerrado. And on animals, we see billions of sentient beings confined in factory farming under conditions that deny their natural behaviours and cause immense suffering. This triple crisis of climate, nature and welfare demands an integrated response. At World Animal Protection, we believe that food systems transformation is not only possible, it's essential to climate success. And we have some clear pathways which we've worked with others to articulate. Firstly is what I've spoken about, the phasing out of harmful harmful subsidies that support, that encourage industrial livestock production and land conversion. We want to see public money redirected towards public good, towards supporting agroecology and welfare-friendly farming. Secondly, we need a legally binding supply chain. We need companies to actually trace and disclose the origin of the cattle and feed, but this needs independent verification, and it's not independently verified at the moment, backed up by making sure that we need to make sure that that is backed up by penalties. Talked about making other forms of finance that may not be subsidies, it might be forms of climate finance, basically flowing towards a just transition. Protecting Indigenous communities and local land rights is critical. Evidence shows that when Indigenous people have secure tenure, rates of deforestation fall. And finally, governments should embed food systems reform in their nationally determined contributions and national climate plans. They have done some of this, but it's not enough. Not all nationally determined plans are in, and not all do what we need them to do. And so these measures would bring climate mitigation, biodiversity conservation and animal welfare together into a coherent policy framework. So we often hear that protecting the Amazon is vital for the planet's lungs, but it's also vital for our collective conscience, for how we coexist in this world with other living beings, with the animals, with the plants. A just transition in food systems can be a win for people, a win for animals and a win for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. There's your headphones back. And let us finish on the talks there. So, going back to how those links are, because analyses, for example, of light-absorbing particles in glaciers in the cryosphere reveal that actually sizable amount of black carbon coming from deforestation in the Amazon in order to allow the livestock agricultural production are then having an impact on the melting capacity of those ice flows. So these issues are fundamentally and centrally interconnected. But we've talked a bit about the problems and a bit on what we can do about them. Let us think a bit more on what we can do as a bit of a discussion now. And I'll ask the first question and look to the audience, so please raise your hand if you have other questions. So let's start with a nice one on the information. If you had one misconception that you'd like to correct about the role of animals in climate change, to get people to understand that, what would that be? What one thing would you do? Chris, can I start with you, please?
Oh no. Well, I would like to talk about the Amazon. Like Kelly put all these problems. I think in the Amazon we already know what to do. Actually, from 2003 to 2012, we reduced 80% of the deforestation in the Amazon. So we know what to do. We know that we can produce cattle, we can produce agriculture without deforestate anything else. We already have the technology, we already have the knowledge for this. So why? What happened? So, for example, I think in the Amazon, we have to work with the farmers. We have to work with these guys because 80% of the deforestation is caused by them. So we have to work with them. We have to try to change something, and we know already what to do. It's just fiscalization. We have the law, actually. The Brazilian law is very good. We have good laws for this, but we have to put in practice. For example, in the past, the first thing a farmer used to do is to cut the forest to give access to the water for the cows, for example. But we have a law that protects this forest. So we just have to do it. At least in the Amazon, I'm talking about about the deforestation in the Amazon.
And let's follow on that thread then, Kelly, the actions that governments can do, in particular maybe linked to their NDCs, since we're here at COP. What's one thing that governments absolutely can do already? We've heard from Chris. What would be your one recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, I think probably for me, I'll answer your question as well. The biggest, probably the issue that we have the biggest problem with is within the industrial animal agricultural system, animals are treated as production units. They're not actually treated as living beings within ecosystems. And I think that if we're able to look at a just transition that looks at some of the issues that we've all been talking about here today, that transitions away from industrial agriculture, industrial animal agriculture, and as Chris said, we already have the answers. Smaller scale producers are already producing, I think it's 2/3 or 3/4, depending on what statistic you look at, of the world's food. This is already happening. Imagine if they were given the policy support, the finances that they needed to be able to do that better. They would be smashing it in terms of what they were able to do in terms of feeding their communities. And I'll just finish on this. Like, I've observed at this COP the Socio-Bio restaurant, which is part of the Na Mesa de COP initiative. And everything there that's being produced and served is being grown by small-scale producers along agroecological principles. And what gives me hope is that, firstly, the food is amazing, it's reasonably priced, it's available to volunteers, and it is the longest queue for food at COP.
Maddie.
Can I jump in? I was just going to say that it's interesting being on a panel with terrestrial focused people because I live in the ocean space, but it is essentially the exact same story in the ocean, but it's not as discussed. And it's reiterating what Kelly said in terms of subsidies and subsidies in the terrestrial space, but it's the same with the ocean. And globally, governments are spending $7 billion a year on harmful fuel subsidies, supporting and propping up industrial fleets that would otherwise not be financially viable. And what these fuel subsidies do is that it allows fleets to go further, fish longer, and use more destructive methods. And so that kind of misconception about those fleets being economically viable alone, like as standalone industry, that they're not. They are propped up by harmful subsidies. And again, we have the solutions. We have the small-scale fishers. We have the artisanal fishers who are already fishing in a sustainable way, and they need, exactly as Kelly said, the policy support, the transition support, and the pressure taken away that the industrial fleets are putting on their fisheries and impacting their livelihoods, etc. So I just reiterate that it is a very similar story in the ocean, and kind of maybe thinking about them as one is important, that they are interconnected systems, that terrestrial intensive agriculture is impacting the ocean space, and that land-sea interface is often not discussed. And then I would also say, from an ocean perspective, that national climate and biodiversity strategies need to talk to one another, and the synergies between them need to be addressed, that conservation and restoration goals need to go hand in hand with decarbonisation, but kind of spatial prioritisation needs to be taken into account so that a decarbonisation strategy is also nature positive and not having a negative impact. And again, that's often a missing piece of the puzzle.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, a few things we can do. And it feels like we're recognising those interconnections of the planetary systems. We've got then a whole anthropogenic harm system that actually has these common themes across these areas of anthropogenic harm, both across climate, land and biodiversity and wetlands and health and beyond, but also across the different regions. But then we have the solutions of those integrated solutions, and actually that just transition is itself then its own healthier system that unlocks some of the human systems that is currently locking in those harmful methods. Let's stick with what we can do then, Maddie, on the governance aspect. And what else do you think needs to change, as well as recognising those synergies? That's been a really good theme of this week and our side event last night. But what needs to change, whether that's on the convention of the conservation of Antarctic marine living resources, or then I'll come to you, Kelly, on food systems policy, or Maddie, from the fishing as well, or forest protection. What from a governance perspective needs to change to unlock those anthropogenic harmful systems and bring us to a better place? Maddie.
Thank you. From a CAMLA perspective, a comprehensive review perhaps of kind of tangible actions that CAMLA can take to overcome this stalemate that we've had since the Ross Sea MPA was designated, and really kind of think about the decision-making process that is in place. As I said, this year with CAMLA, again, we didn't see the progress that we wanted to, and so thinking about what needs to change, but a sort of revitalization of their conservation mandate, is really important, and that's what our Antarctica campaign is calling for. And then in terms of broader ocean issues and kind of the ocean space within the UNFCCC, we've seen incredible progress in the last few years. There's now an ocean and climate dialogue that came into fruition in Glasgow, and so we're really seeing the ocean being embedded more within NDCs and in national adaptation plans, and there's a real movement to blue the NDCs at the moment, and so just kind of using that momentum, I think, is really important. And again, as I said, the synergies and the recognition that land and sea interface is really important and can't be ignored, and that what happens on land is going to impact the ocean as well. And so thinking about the way that the ocean is a blue thread within different areas of the NDC, so it impacts energy, it impacts aquatic food systems, it impacts conservation, it impacts coastal tourism, and so thinking about how all of these different sectors can be united through a kind of different lens of the way, or looking at the ocean in a different way, and ensuring that it's embedded within all of these different strategies. I think I'll leave it there. Chris?
Go for it.
I think thinking about forests, that it's more my thing. I think, as I said, I think we have good policies, but we need to put in practice. This is the first thing. I think we need to reform all these organs that make the fiscalization, and we need a reform, a big reforming about this. But also, I think we need to start thinking to stop everything that stop the deforestation and invest on an economy that keep the forest stand. So maybe, I know there is a lot of issues about the carbon market, for example, but nowadays is the only thing that keep the forest standard. So, but there's a lot of issues about it. So we have to maybe try to reorganize this. For example, in Brazil, we are now trying to approve, how can I say this, to, I forgot the word, but we are trying to make the rules for this market in Brazil. And now it's happening, but it's still happening. But we have to do this. But also with logging, reduce the impact of logging. We have to work with the economic background of this that are destroying the forest. We have to work with this, because unless we have this expression in Brazil, we are drying ice. If you don't work with this, if we don't work with the producers and try to show them a better way to do it and to stop, I think it's zero deforestation. This has to be the rule in the Amazon.
Here, thank you, Chris. Kelly, please.
Thanks. I'll keep it brief and top line because I know we're heading towards the end. Despite having been at most COP since Copenhagen, I actually still have a bit of a glass half full when it comes to outcomes at the climate talks. I think, though, we've seen enormous progress in terms of getting food systems starting to be talked about and recognised within the UNFCCC. And I think that the pace of that has been relatively quick. However, I think we have a lot more to do. This is the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Those temperature goals, the 1.5 degrees in the Paris Agreement, is not going to be reached unless we tackle emissions from food systems. That includes the fossil fuel emissions that make up the food systems profile, but we definitely need to make sure that we are tackling food systems, and that needs to happen in so many different places in these talks. It needs to happen in agriculture. It needs to happen, you spoke about the NDCs, it needs to happen in the NDCs. We need to see just transition pathways in those NDCs. It needs to happen in terms of redirection of harmful subsidies in the same way as many fought to see a redirection of fossil fuel subsidies for so long, and finally have started to see some progress there. And then the last thing I want to finish on is that we cannot forget that we are up against incredibly powerful business interests. I'm not saying business shouldn't have a say. There are responsible businesses, there are irresponsible businesses, but the voice of business should not outweigh the voice of farmers, of fisher folk, of small-scale producers, of civil society. We need all of us to collectively work out how we can move forward on tackling these emissions from food systems.
Thank you, Kelly, and I think that will be particularly important for making sure that the recognition of the importance of agriculture, and the same would apply to industrial farming on land as to aquaculture and harvesting and fishing. That recognition doesn't then push us down the wrong path to some disintegrated solution, and those voices are essential to make that happen. Let's finish on one very quick question that we have, and this can be quick too, in one sentence. What would be then your key message to governments here at COP, particularly about why the wild animals and how we treat the farmed and fished animals, why does that matter? What would be your one message? Kelly, we'll start with you, and then Chris and Maddie.
Yeah, I think my one message would be that animals are allies here. Animals are critical along with people, along with health, along with the environment, to the survival of our planet. And any one of those on their own is not going to work. So my, I guess, plea is that we have a very integrated approach to people, to animals, to the climate, and that we take that forward, and that we see progress around transitioning our food systems.
Thank you, Maddie. Chris?
Yeah, I think that conserving animals, you conserve the climate. You solve the problem. If you save the animals, I mean, if you keep them, if you protect them, you will accelerate the recovery of the forest. For example, you're gonna protect the oceans. So I think it's if you talk about animals, you are talking about life. You are talking about the protection of the forest. There's no forest without animals. If you take out the animals in medium and long term, the forest will disappear. So if you protect animals, if you include animals in the discussions, it will be easier to protect.
Lovely, thank you. And it's a really tangible, cost-effective, motivating solution as well. Maddie, please.
You. I would reiterate what both of you have said, but I'd also add that ocean action is climate action, and to not forget the ocean, and that it needs to have a seat at the table at all of these conversations, and with that all of the ocean's incredible animals and ecosystems. And then I'd also say, and again a kind of plea, a call, but that decarbonisation can go hand in hand with nature positive action. You don't need to have one and not the other. They need to come in tandem and together.
Thank you. Yeah, don't forget the oceans, don't forget the animals. They're essential to meeting 2% and certainly 1.5%. And a really big thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to the pavilion and the tech team and the organisers for the wonderful support. Thank you to the speaker who couldn't make it, and to all of you for being here. And I think we've seen and shown and heard and felt very clearly how animals are essential for underpinning the value and the resilience of these ecosystems, from the cryosphere to the Amazonian rainforest. And that means protecting animals protects those environments. It protects biodiversity, it protects the climate, as well as it protecting the livelihoods, the health and the sustainable economic development of the communities that depend on them. So we absolutely need to include animals in the agendas here, in the Rio Conventions and elsewhere, and form a core part of that joint work programme. There's a couple of resources that the World Federation for Animals and its members and colleagues here, such as Mercy for Animals and I4, that we can share. But otherwise, I just wish you a very good rest of COP, and thank you very much indeed.